Okay, think about this for a second. What if right now your phone buzzing, that next episode starting automatically, what if it's all kind of subtly hacking your brain?
Hmm. That's a strong way to put it, but yeah, there's something to that.
Right. So today we're going to really dig into this. We're doing a deep dive on the idea of a dopamine detox.
And we're leaning on some really interesting ideas from Thibaut Meurisse's book, Dopamine Detox. Reset your brain, reclaim your focus.
Exactly. Our mission here is basically to figure out how we can, hit reset, get our focus back.
And really take back control. Right. Understand what's going on up there and find a way to, well, gain some clarity.
So let's start with dopamine itself. Most people hear dopamine and think, oh, pleasure chemical, feel good stuff.
Yeah, that's the common understanding. But it's actually a bit more complex. It's key for motivation, for learning, for driving us towards things our brain thinks are good for us.
Like survival stuff, traditionally. Food, reward.
Precisely. But the problem is our modern world has, well, it's found ways to game that system.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Game the system. How so?
Well, it's this overload of instant gratification. We're just swimming in what you might call cheap dopamine hits.
Cheap hits. Like what?
Think about it. Getting a like on Instagram, the next YouTube short autoplaying, that sugar rush from, junk food.
Okay, yeah. Easy stuff, quick fixes.
Exactly. Super accessible, low effort, gives you that immediate little spike. But the downside, the book argues this constant flood is actually, it's killing our motivation.
Killing motivation for the harder stuff.
Yeah, for the long-term goals.
Yeah.
Your brain basically asks, why put in the work for something way off in the future when I can get a little hit right now? It gets lazy in a sense.
That really makes you think. Our brains just get used to that easy reward cycle.
Totally. Let's paint a picture. Imagine person A. They wake up, first thing is grab the phone, scroll, scroll, scroll.
We've all been there.
Right. Maybe some sugary breakfast, then hours just vanish into YouTube or TikTok. At the end of the day, how fulfilled do they feel? How much have they actually moved towards something meaningful?
Probably not much. Okay, so what's the contrast? Person B.
Okay, person B. Maybe they start with, say, 5 minutes of meditation. Or they actually sit down and read a chapter of a book. Or spend an hour focused on a project that matters to them.
Big difference in approach.
Huge difference. And the point Meurisse makes is that person B isn't just like naturally more disciplined. They've actively mastered their dopamine.
Master their dopamine.
They've trained their brain, consciously or not, to find the reward not just in the quick hit, but in the process, in the effort, the focus, the achievement of something deeper.
Okay, so if we're surrounded by these cheap hits, these easy dopamine sources, how do we even start to, reset that?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And this is where the dopamine detox idea really comes into play.
Sure.
Meurisse calls it like hitting the reset button on your brain.
Reset button. Sounds intense.
It can sound that way, but the core idea is actually pretty straightforward.
Okay, break it down. How does it work?
So the mechanism is about temporarily cutting out those sources of instant gratification we talked about. The cheap dopamine.
Phone scrolling, the junk food.
Exactly. By doing that, you essentially force your brain to look elsewhere for satisfaction. You retrain it to find reward in things that take more effort, like deep work and long-term rewards.
Retrain the brain. Oh.
There's this really powerful insight in the book I want to highlight. Right now, your brain is addicted to distraction. And critically, a dopamine detox isn't about punishment. It's about freedom.
Freedom? Freedom from what? The constant pull.
Exactly. Freedom from being unconsciously dragged towards the next notification, the next easy hit.
Yeah.
It's about regaining conscious control over your attention.
That idea of freedom really hits home. Okay, but practically speaking, how does someone actually do this? It sounds daunting, maybe.
It can seem that way, yeah. But Meurisse lays out some clear steps. Step 1 is pretty simple, but crucial. You have to identify your dopamine triggers.
Okay, so figure out what my specific cheap hits are.
Precisely. Sit down. Be honest. Write down everything that gives you instant pleasure but leaves you feeling empty. Or maybe just not great.
Like what kind of things, typically?
Well, common ones are obviously social media, endless news scrolling, junk food, binge-watching shows, maybe certain types of video games.
Right, the usual suspects.
Yeah, it's personal, though. What's a trigger for one person might not be for another. So self-awareness is key.
Okay, so I've got my list. What's next? Just stop.
Pretty much, at least temporarily.
Well,
Step 2 is go cold turkey. Meurisse suggests starting with a manageable period, like maybe 24 hours.
24 hours. No social media, no YouTube, no junk food, stuff on my list.
Yep, avoid those specific triggers you identified. The core idea for that period is just you and your thoughts.
Whoa,
Yeah.
okay. Just me and my thoughts. That might be the scariest part for some people.
It can be. We're so used to feeling every spare moment. But hold on, let's clarify something you brought up earlier. Work stuff.
Yeah, like what if I need my computer for work? Or need to check emails?
Good point.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about zero screens or zero pleasure. It's about cutting out the compulsive low-value stuff. Productive work on a computer. Fine. Mindlessly scrolling Twitter for an hour instead of working. That's the target.
Okay, so it's about the intention and the quality of the activity during that detox period, not just a blanket ban on everything.
Exactly. It's about removing the easy, automatic gratification to give your brain that quiet space to recalibrate its reward settings.
Got it. So identify triggers, go cold turkey for a bit. What's step 3?
Step 3 is crucial for making it stick. It's replace cheap dopamine with high-quality rewards.
Okay, so don't just leave a void, fill it with something better.
Precisely. While you're cutting out the junk, you consciously choose activities that are more fulfilling, even if they require a bit more effort initially.
Like what? Give me some examples.
So instead of scrolling, read. Grab that book that's been sitting there. Instead of binge watching, work on a project. Maybe brainstorm that business idea, or learn a few chords on the guitar, or go for a walk in nature.
Activities that involve creation, learning, or genuine connection, maybe.
You got it. Things that lead to growth. The goal here is to actively train your brain to crave growth, not distraction.
Train your brain. I like that. It sounds like building a new habit, a better one.
It really is. You're building new pathways, showing your brain, hey, this feels good too, and actually this feeling lasts longer and it's more satisfying.
That makes sense. Does the book give any examples of this working for people, like real stories?
It does. There's a great one about a student named Jake.
Okay, Jake the student, what was his deal?
Well, Jake was apparently really struggling, failing classes, totally hooked on video games and YouTube. Sound familiar?
Yeah, sounds like that Person S scenario we talked about, deep in the cheap dopamine trap.
Exactly. So he decides to try a dopamine detox. He commits to it.
I think what happened?
The results were pretty striking. The book says in just 30 days, Jake went from barely passing to acing his exams.
Wow, 30 days? From failing to acing? That's huge.
It is huge. And the key takeaway wasn't that Jake suddenly became a genius overnight.
Right, it wasn't about getting smarter.
No, it was simply that he just reclaimed his focus.
By cutting out the constant distractions, he could actually use the intelligence and ability he already had.
He unlocked his potential just by managing his dopamine, essentially.
That's the idea. That focus allowed him to study effectively, to learn. And you can imagine that success probably spilled over into other parts of his life too, right? More confidence, maybe better habits overall.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's bring this back to everyone listening. We've talked about how powerful your brain is.
Seriously, it's the most incredible tool you have.
But also how easily it can get, well, hijacked, as the book says. Hijacked by all this constant stimulation, these cheap hits.
Leaving you feeling scattered, maybe unmotivated, wondering where the day went.
So the big question we want to leave you with, really, is will you take back control?
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be this massive life-altering thing immediately. Maybe you just experiment.
Start small. All right. Maybe try just one day. No distractions, just progress. See what happens. See how you feel.
One day of cutting out your biggest triggers, replacing them with something meaningful.
It's about taking that first step, however small, towards reclaiming your attention, your focus.
And ultimately reclaiming control over your own life and where it's headed. What could you actually do with that reclaimed focus? That's something to think about.